It's the dictionary. 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 It's the dictionary.
Hello, word nerds. Welcome to another episode of The Dictionary. Thank you for checking out this podcast and YouTube show now. I am always very happy to have a guest on because it's not very often, but every once in a while it happens. And today we have the amazing Helen Zaltzman from the podcast The Allusionist and many other things. I think we might have to learn about that. I learned about, well, first of all, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. What could be more of a treat than reading the dictionary with you?
Exactly. You, of all my guests, probably are the most interested in actually the concept of this podcast in general, reading the dictionary, talking about words. I've had some fantastic people on, but none of them are quite as into the word part of this show, this whole concept. So I think that we're going to have some fun today. And if you do have fun, it would be great to have you back. But today, I had to get you on for this specific episode, of course, because we've got the word etymology and a few other related words. And so I first learned about you from the podcast Ologies, and I had to rep my Ologies t-shirt today.
Oh, that's very nice.
Of course.
That's lovely.
It's I don't know if you have one, but you got to get one.
I don't.
One of the best podcasts, of course, until I learned about The Allusionist, and now that is also one of the best podcasts in the world.
Yes.
And so you had an episode about etymology a while ago, right? Do you remember when that first one aired?
On Ologies?
Yeah.
That was early 2019.
2019.
And I don't remember why these things are so lodged in my head, but it was like January 2019. I think it came about because someone on Twitter asked Ali Ward, and Ali Ward kindly acquiesced. And I went to her apartment where she was living at the time in this sort of the more historic buildings of LA I find really cool. And they're not historic by British standards.
Oh, yeah.
Where we have things in our fridge that are older than historic LA buildings. But I do think they're very, like a lot of that early 20th century architecture was very beautiful. And she was living in this one that had this kind of haunted convent vibe.
Cool.
And it was the first time I met her, but she's like just as wonderful as you would hope from listening to the show.
Yeah. She sounds like she's a blast. And so
she's delightful.
And of course,
delightful, pure-spirited human.
who's just endlessly curious about everything, which is one of the things that I really appreciate about her, because I am also endlessly curious about things. And I don't remember if I heard your episode when it aired or if I was binging later, but then you had a revisit. Your episode got re-aired sometime in 2023, and that's when I heard it again, and I was like, ooh, etymology. I'm doing my podcast. I'm getting close to the E's. This is the perfect time to reach out, and we were able to make it happen. So thank you for doing this.
As you're at E, how do you feel about having so much of the alphabet left to go? Are you like, cool, I can do this, I've paced myself, or are you like, oh no?
It's a little bit of both, maybe. I have been doing this actually since January 2019. So when you did that interview. So it's been 5 years, and I'm...
Okay. In another 20, you'll probably be done.
Oh, yeah.
Although I think the S section is particularly full. So.
I think it is. The A's were long. The C's were really long. The S's are going to be long.
Yeah. There's so many science terms as well, because at the end of my show, I randomly select a word from the dictionary, but it's not fully random. The selection of the page is random, but I don't want to just land on a chemical because that's boring. And there's so many chemicals in the dictionary.
Yeah, there are. I actually wanted to ask you about those randomly, quote unquote, randomly selected words.
We got truthing happening.
Well, yeah, that was like, I was curious, what is the actual process of that? Because every single word you pick, it seems so perfect. It's a noun. It's a thing that you can use in your everyday life. To an extent. This book, the book that you're working from, seems like it might be a little old.
Yes, I'm not sure exactly how old, but I've had it for at least 22 years because it's my husband's and we've been together for 22 years. And it's a concise Oxford dictionary. I would estimate that editorially it's probably 40 years old at this point. So I randomly select the page, and sometimes I do choose the first word that my eyes are light on. But if it's a word where the definition is not very interesting, or it's so familiar I feel like there's not a lot of fun to use it, or it's something that does not wash by the standards of the present day, which the dictionary is also full of, then I avoid it because no one needs their vibe to be killed. Or if it feels a bit too on the nose for what the interviewee's just been talking about, I'm worried it might seem a little insulting in a way.
I'm glad that some thought has gone into that, because they seem a little bit too good, too perfect. But I have not been able to use any of the words in any emails yet. Maybe
no, it's toughy, really.
They are tough, but I love hearing these new words with these sort of older definitions. Of course, it sounds like it's at least 40 years old, so I love that part of it, and I love the sound of the page flips in there. Those all seem absolutely accurate, to what you're doing, live recorded. So yeah, I'm glad that you throw those in at the end of each episode.
It's also interesting that how much the dictionaries vary, because sometimes I use a different one if I'm traveling and staying at someone's house. I use their dictionary. I was in Australia about 18 months ago using a friend's family dictionary in Macquarie. You got a lot of different wildlife in the Australian dictionaries, which is exciting. You see the different ways that the etymologists have done the definitions and the different ways that dictionaries have written, because we think of them as being dispassionate and neutral, and they're not, because humans have had to do it and humans are not fully capable.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the different types of things that you'll get from different parts of the world. They're all English, but culturally they're completely different. Yeah,
so many different Englishes. And the other thing I've been doing for the last couple of years is I do these live streams every other week for patrons for the Allusionist, and I have a very big collection of dictionaries because I used to work in a secondhand bookshop, so anything interesting that came into the dictionary section I would be like, mine! But then when you read them, you realise that all dictionaries are definitely not created equal. Some of them are taking great liberties with the concept of being a dictionary, and instead are usually just one person's gripes about a topic.
One of your recent episodes mentioned more feminist dictionaries. Do you... I think, if I remember correctly, what was said was that there are some that are specifically geared towards maybe feminist terms. I don't remember exactly, but are there any dictionaries that you can think of that you're aware of that lean more feminist or culturally modern, I guess would be the phrase?
I don't actually have any of the feminist dictionaries. A lot of my dictionaries are quite old and not very societally generous. It's also just who got to publish things. But what I do have is a copy of the Queen's English, which is a queer dictionary. So maybe that fits with what you're talking about.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And it took me a second to get the title of it, the Queen's English. I was like, why?
There you go.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah, maybe you just take these things a bit more for granted when you grow up in a country that still somehow has a monarchy.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't work now that we've got a king. The double meaning doesn't quite fly as well.
She had such a hold on the world that I think it still works.
In a very literal kind of iron claw way.
So what's your path like? How did you end up here?
What a great question. How detailed did you expect to go, and how historical?
As much as you feel necessary. Obviously there's a lot of years to talk about, but what were some of like the main points that got you into words and language?
Yeah, not much happens on most of those years. I don't think I've had a very biographically thrilling existence generally, which is nicer to live but not very interesting to hear about. I think I was always interested in language from the point where I started being aware of it, and I think that came around the time when I went to school. At the school we were taught French and Latin from a pretty early age, from the age of 7, and that's made me start thinking, I wonder if those words are connected to these words I'm already familiar with in English. And I was never taught about how English works at all. which is pretty remiss because it's a very complicated thing that I had to use all the time as someone growing up in an English-speaking country. Seems like a big thing to leave out of our education. So I had to piece together how English works from learning other languages.
I love that you, not just you, but other countries, especially in Europe, got to learn about these other languages so young. You know, in America, a lot of people don't even get the chance to learn a second language, and if they do, it's maybe not until like 6th grade, till you're like 11 years old or something. And so,
Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed in our educational system. So I took a little bit of French in 6th grade and then Spanish for a couple of years after that. And then when I got to high school, I wasn't really interested in taking another language, but I was convinced to take Latin because they said that people who take Latin score better in the ACTs and SATs and things like that. And so I was like, oh, it sounds interesting, you know, get to see where our languages come from. And so I did end up taking 2 years of Latin. I'm sure I've forgotten most of it, but, you know, the basics are still in there. So those really help when I get to the etymologies in these words. And I'm glad that you brought up languages because you seem to have an ear for languages or something. How many languages do you know or like what have you picked up over all these years from other languages?
Okay, well, I'm not fluent in anything except English, which is a shame because I have learnt a few languages. So I had French for 7 years. And I've also been doing Duolingo French for the last, well, I've got 1,000 and something day streak. So for that long, but I don't feel like I've really learned a lot of French from that. But now I can't break the streak because it's so big. And then Latin I learnt for 7 years as well. I did about 3 years of ancient Greek at school. And Russian I learnt for 3 years. And I was the only person in my Russian class, so I didn't learn to speak it really.
Wait, you're the only person in your class?
Yes, and my teacher was about to retire. So we would sit in this like very warm, very small classroom at the top of a building, alternately like falling asleep because it was so hot and there was no one else there to wake us up. And he would just sort of talk about, well, when I'm retired, I'm going to travel to here and I'm going to eat this thing.
That's useful.
But I did love learning. Well, I did love being able to read Russian texts in Russian. I had to translate the Chekhov play Uncle Vanya, which I'd read in translation and I'd seen a production of, and I found it a bit frustrating when I saw it before because I thought, oh, everyone just wants something and they're not doing anything about it. And then when I read it in Russian, there was just so much more emotion in there. The frustrations felt so much more powerful, and the fact that they were kind of trapped in their situation felt a lot more understandable. So that was cool, but I can't remember, and I really can't remember very much. And then I learned Italian. I actually went in between school and university. I mostly worked in this secondhand bookshop in my hometown, which was great for the acquisition of unusual dictionaries. But I went for 2 months to Italy and went to Italian school. So that was the only time I've learnt language in this really immersive way where I had to use it. The teacher didn't speak English, and the real triumph was when you went out to buy groceries or something and you said something to someone in Italian and they would answer you in Italian. That's when you really knew you were getting somewhere.
You have this amazing base of languages. Like I remember hearing you talk about you're going to be in New Zealand soon, or saying some New Zealand words, and your accent is so perfect. You know, obviously there's some thought that goes into that. You don't want to have just an English accent or something. You put that New Zealand spin on it, which is really respectful, obviously, and accurate. So yeah, your brain seems to be all tied up in language, which is fantastic.
Well, that's kind of you. I try to be respectful, and sometimes, particularly with pronunciation, you do the best that you can do, but it's still gonna piss some people off. And it's not necessarily intentional, but just there's a lot of things that you just don't know that you don't know until you find out, or just ways that my mouth doesn't work. There's a lot of American vowel shapes that I can't do. And once someone introduced themselves to me and I said his name back to him just to check I got it right, except I couldn't actually pronounce it right because I couldn't say the vowel in the American way. And I was like, it sounds like I'm correcting him, but it's just because my mouth is incompetent. And I still feel really bad about it. I met him, this is 2016. I'm still carrying this around.
I think you can let that one go, probably.
Okay, I'll try and exercise
But
myself. And the other language I've just started learning in the last few weeks is ASL. I've never learned a sign language before, and that's really, really
How's that
interesting.
going?
It's going okay. I feel nervous because I don't feel ready to be using it with people, which I think means I'm going to learn it slower because I feel like I want to practice on my own more before I'm practicing with people. Maybe again, it's a worrying about the respect thing. Like if you can't do it properly, then maybe people will think you're not respecting it enough. I don't know.
But also the fact
Anyway,
that you're showing that you're trying is also something.
I hope so. I think a lot of the way that sign language has been portrayed on screen when it's something that isn't specifically about speakers of sign language is people making mistakes or misspelling something in a hilarious way.
Yeah.
And I don't want to.
My sister is actually a sign language interpreter, and so that's I don't
cool.
sign. I did take one semester when I was a senior in high school. I can do the alphabet in like a couple of words, but that's about it. It would have been great if she could have taught me all these years so I could be fluent. I would love to be fluent in ASL. What was it that made you decide to learn that?
I'd wanted to for years, partly because I was so interested to learn a language where the grammar is different and the process is different, and I just didn't get to it. And also I was living in Britain until about a year ago, and I thought, well, which one do I learn? Should I learn BSL because I'm here, or ASL because I'm probably more likely to use that with people because I hadn't planned to stay in Britain? And they're very different languages. And I'd be really curious to learn more about the etymology of those languages, the forms and how different they all are, because there are a few hundred sign languages, and who is it that is the most polyglot in sign languages?
Oh yeah, there's got to be somebody who just knows at least enough about a lot of them. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, we just need to
that's
find them.
using such a different part of your brain. It's a language, but it's a totally different type of language that takes a lot of effort to really solidify it.
Yeah, in a way, it's certain things are really intuitive. Like some of the gestures are easy to remember because they feel really appropriate. Some of the grammar is more simplified, like the pronouns. There's fewer pronouns, but also we just haven't reached a level yet where we might be exposed to more complicated things. It's like that when you learn any language, isn't it? You get very simple verb tenses, for instance, in the early stages. But it's so long since I learned a new language, and this is the first time in the 21st century I've done it, and my brain was a lot better and a lot more plastic when I was young, and now I'm 43 and it's harder to acquire these things.
Same. Yeah, also 43, and I'm afraid to learn things. I really want to learn a lot of things, and I don't have time to learn a lot of things, but there's like ASL. I want to learn Morse code. I want to learn Braille. I want to learn all this stuff, but yeah, it's hard.
It is. And I think, what have I been doing with all this time? But
right. Working, I guess.
Yeah, working. That's it. Damn.
Yeah. Well, so like, what language is a big part of your life, but what are some other things that have that you have been working on?
I made I sewed a really good draft excluder the other day. Because it was very cold where I lived for a few days. We had like proper Arctic winds, and we also have a very large gap under our front door where the Arctic winds rush through. And so I made us this draft excluder in the shape of an eel. It's really nice. And in fact, it's so nice that my husband was like, I don't want to put that on the floor. So now the eel lives on the sofa, and I've got to make a worse draft excluder.
Oh, you got to make a crappy one now.
Yeah, it's got to be ugly so that no one's going to fall in love with it and want to keep it as a friend. Well,
because you might step on it and get dirty, and
Right, yeah. And it just feels disrespectful as well to put such a little character in
you have to
disagreeable job.
Make it a creature or something that you don't mind stepping on.
That's right, yeah. I wonder what that could be.
Yeah.
that is also the right shape. What is about 40 inches long and not lovable?
Long and slender. Something will come up, or maybe like a whole bunch of little things in a row. Let's see. Oh, I was wondering about. I've heard you on a couple other podcasts. I think you've put those feeds on the Allusionist feed as well, or I found them other places. And I am curious to know, what sort of prep do you do? I guess it probably depends on the situation, but when they're asking you about the etymology of these terms, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer was one of them. Did you get those words ahead of time so you could look them up, or how much of this knowledge do you already have in your head that you don't need to look up?
I have a very unpredictable selection lodged in my brain. Generally, my brain feels like there is nothing in it, and there's just this, like the draft unexcluded by the draft excluded, there's just this like whistling wind through my brain because there's nothing to stop it. With the Buffy one, I hadn't seen the show either at the time. I did watch some in preparation for recording this episode about the vocabulary of it, but the hosts and the listeners of Buffering the Vampire Slayer had questions, and then some of them don't have very satisfactory answers. This is the way with etymology. It's something I learned from my first podcast, Answer Me This, where we took questions from the audience, and a lot of the questions were about language and why do we call this thing by this term, or where does this saying come from? And just so often the answer is origin unknown, which is it's unsatisfying. So I wanted to just weed out the ones that weren't going to be that interesting to hear about. And then the rest, I do quite a lot of research because I feel bad when I'm wrong, which happens plenty. And listeners are usually very polite in pointing things out and very educational. But I love to be not wrong, which requires some preparation.
Yeah. Anything that we can do to not be wrong makes us definitely feel better.
Right.
Do I remember hearing that you are also, I mean, I can tell from your podcast, but are you also a bit of a comedian? Maybe not stand-up per se, but I think were you on Taskmaster or something?
No, I was not on Taskmaster. That would be great, though. I am available.
Something similar, maybe.
No.
Okay.
But I was around the British stand-up scene for quite a long time because my brother's a stand-up. Right. So when he was starting out at the end of the 90s, I was at a lot of his gigs, and a lot of the people were coming up at the same time as him. John Oliver was his stand-up partner for many years before Daily Show and what he's doing now. And so it was a big influence because I was watching so much of it. And more importantly, I was watching people do the same set more than once, which is extremely revealing because you see them the first time and you think, that was a really clever thing they came up with on the spot. And then you see it exactly the same way the second time. You're like, it still sounds very convincingly new, but it was prepared. And what is the artifice that goes into that and the craft? And I never wanted to do stand-up. It's a hard life. At the time, I didn't want to do a medium that was not conversational, where it was just me largely in charge talking to an audience. And also just, I had... most of the comedians in Britain at the time were men. I had a couple of female friends who were doing it and are still doing it and are successful, but just the life was horrific. Like the stuff they went through was so bad. And it's a bit better now, and there's a lot more not men on the scene, but you had to really want to do it. And I did not want to do it enough to have a bad life. So I didn't. And I did podcasting instead. But you don't get on Taskmaster without doing stand-up, alas.
I've only seen a little bit of that show, and apologies, I was wrong. I was not able to be right in that situation, and I feel very bad. I should have prepared more.
If they asked, I'd be pleased.
Oh yeah,
that would be good.
I could see that someday. I could see that. I remember seeing on the Patreon somebody posting about, what was it, British comedy, stand-up comedy, and it was a picture of your brother.
Yeah, yes.
He's the epitome of British comedy, stand-up comedy.
Yes, he's arrived. There's an article about him in my mother's newspaper today, which is very exciting for her.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's nice. And he was actually a very useful influence as well, because I remember going to see the first show he did at the Edinburgh Festival, which is a month-long. People do their show every day, and often other shows as well. Like sometimes they'll do several shows a day. And so he was pretty new to stand-up. He'd been doing it for about 18 months at the time. And he said, when I get bored of a piece of material, I have to stop doing it. And he was doing a show with some other people where he could recite their whole set pretty quickly because it never changed. And I thought it was quite useful to know that you should tap into your own boredom as a creative indicator.
Yeah. His show was probably completely different by the end of that month, because you probably get bored of something pretty quickly when you're doing it all the time.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes that your energy levels can't really supply the anti-boredom that your boredom levels would want.
Yeah, you prepared.
But yeah, he developed pretty quickly because he was like, okay, I'm sick of myself. Yeah. And I often feel like that about myself as well, but because it's a podcast, you only really have to say things once and then it's done.
Yeah, and you may not have gone into stand-up, but you clearly have. You've got a skill. You've got a comedy skill, and I don't know what it is exactly, but your dry sense of humor is so it affects me so much. I love it so much. It's
thank you.
In your intros, in throughout the episode, in the end. I don't know what it is, but it's I love your sense of humor and your comedy and your wit, whatever it is. It's great. So please don't stop.
Thank you very much. That's a very nice compliment. I think it was because the family I grew up in, you had to be somewhat witty to survive.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Healthy. But also, no one's coming to my podcast to feel worse. I think sometimes I make them feel worse. Sometimes I make them feel worse in a productive way, but my hope is not to make people feel worse, because most people are listening to podcasts to like take the edge off life.
Yeah.
And I need to remember that, even if I am feeling a bit life edgy when making them.
And that's the good thing about your podcast, is that it is pure, just like Allie's, and maybe a little bit mine, is that it is pure edutainment, because we are being entertained. You are making us laugh. You're making us think. You're making us learn new things. And there's no end to the types of words and language things that you could talk about.
There is no end. We're never going to rest.
Yeah.
I think sometimes mine is lacking in the attainment part. It goes up and down. I think a lot of it is just when you're making a show long term, the way that you're feeling at the time is going to creep into the material.
Yeah.
And sometimes language isn't fun. You must encounter this. In fact, I had a question for you about this show. How do you deal with it when you get to the bits of the dictionary where it is maybe not the most compassionate definition, or if it was being written now, it would be written in a very different way, or if it's just loaded in a way that at the time they got away with without being questioned about it, and now invites scrutiny.
Yeah. Well, I have definitely given my 2 cents when I come across things like that. There's a lot of genderized words. I've spoken about that many, many times. Why do we need to have these genderized words? We don't. I'm sure future versions of dictionaries will maybe not have them or something. When I come across sort of these big topics, I have to talk about them. I have to say my thoughts, which I think probably match your thoughts in a lot of ways. I will say what I feel like I have to say. And, I'm not an expert on anything really. But I know enough. I know a little bit about enough things to say some stuff. Gender has been one of those big things, of course. I've come across words like African American or abortion, or I'm trying to think of some of those words earlier in the dictionary. So sometimes it does get serious and it can get a little political, but I also try and, like yourself, I try and keep things as much as possible light and silly and goofy. So, I'll do silly voices or songs or whatever pops into my mind. I'm like something to keep it light. But yeah, there have been awkward segues, I'm sure, talking about something serious, and then we gotta go to a new word.
That's the path that you're on
Yeah.
for the next 20 years. Do you get complaints? I get complaints from people saying, stop saying that language is political. And I'm like, well, it wasn't me that made it that way.
Yeah.
And as soon as you know anything about it, I was sort of ignorant about it for a long time, about how uneven it is. Let's say it's a very broad description. But as soon as you know virtually anything, just so many of your preconceptions cannot continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what's so cool about learning the history of all those words, is that you get to see sort of what happened there. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't have a big listenership. And so I have not gotten any complaints, really. I've gotten a few suggestions of tweaking things here and there, but, no complaints yet, which is good. But again, that's probably because only 50 or 60 people listen at this point.
Well, 50 or 60 polite people.
Yeah. I've got some good reviews. So, I'll take
Great.
it. I'll take it.
That's the best.
Well, we'll maybe dig a little bit more into the etymology stuff when we get there, but should we actually talk about some words?
Would love to.
I'll bet. Okay, well, our first word in this episode is Etrurian. I will spell this one. I won't spell everything, but I spell some of them. Capital Etrurian. This is a noun from 1566, and the synonym is just Etruscan. Etrurian is also an adjective, and Etruscan is actually our next word. But before we get to the next word,
Convenient.
Helen, first tiny little curveball. After each word, I like to make a little sound effect. So this was actually a suggestion from somebody. They said, could you just make a little sound effect so we know that word's done, and here comes the next word. So
Okay.
I usually just make it with my mouth, and it's
Yeah.
I'll do the same sound effect throughout the whole episode. Is there anything that pops in your brain of a sound effect that you can make with your mouth or anything else?
Wait just a second.
We are waiting. We're gonna hold the phone until we get some fantastic. See, she's got some guitars over there. Her husband's guitars are there in the background, so this could get really interesting really quickly. Okay, she's coming back. The three headphones have got to go back on.
Yeah, it's cumbersome.
Ooh,
But,
this looks
you
fun.
asked. I'm recording in a room full of instruments.
Yeah.
So there was a glockenspiel close by. So how about that? Or have I already laboured this way too long?
Oh no, this is perfect.
And everyone's like, I'm trapped on Etrurian and you won't let me out.
As I've always said, when there's a glockenspiel nearby, you must play it.
I used to play glockenspiel at certain comedy stages of British music festivals.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in the mid to late 2000s. It's because it's an instrument that even if you can't play music, as I can't, basically sounds all right, or sounds about as all right as it's gonna.
Yeah.
Well, this one has not been played for years, but all right, let's word over.
That's amazing. And it costs nothing. If you're able to just sort of keep that nearby, and when I call for it, I will have you do the sound effect.
You say it costs nothing. I think this glockenspiel cost me £20 back in 2006.
Worth it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay, the next word is the word Etruscan with a capital E. This is the first form. This one is an adjective from 1584. This is of, relating to, or characteristic of Etruria, the Etruscans, or the Etruscan language. And this is from, we'll briefly talk about the etymology. I don't know if you know more. I did not allow you to prepare in any way.
No, you didn't.
I didn't. I'm sorry.
So you're not
about
going to
that.
get anything good.
Yeah. But this is from the Latin Etruscus, which is akin to the Latin Etruria with a capital E, which is just an ancient country. It just means ancient country, which is kind of interesting because if it's named Etruria, Etruscans, Etruscan language, at the time, I'm guessing they weren't calling themselves ancient country or ancient people.
They were as modern as you could get at the time.
Exactly. So, do you know anything about the Etruscans, this group of people, this time? Anything?
Well, all that I know really is roughly where it was, because it's around where modern day Tuscany is. And they're not really sure what the name Etruscan meant, but Etruria was the name of the region.
So do you think that that's the name that we put on them, now later in the 1500s, because it just meant ancient country? Or it sounds like maybe we don't even know what they called themselves.
I wouldn't want to say, because I don't want historians of Italy to be peeved.
Or the Etruscans themselves.
Right. And I don't know if Etruria meant ancient country, or if they're just like, it was the name of an ancient country.
Yeah.
And I can't be sure what it actually meant. But yeah, things are a little hard to establish about what nations called themselves in the past. Often the record keeping will not reflect the reality of that. It's complicated.
Yeah, very much. Well, I will probably put a link in the show notes for Etruscan and this whole group of people, this place. It sounds like Italy, right? Tuscany's in Italy?
That's right. Yeah, it's in sort of like north central Italy and some of the west coast.
So yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes if people want to go learn more about that, because they won't be able to find it any other place except for the links in my show notes. Okay, it's sound effect time. I love it just goes on forever. Just that high pitched. I can't even think of the word there's a word. What adjective would you put to a glockenspiel?
Maybe that was a little trill.
Trill, yeah, that's a good one. The second form of Etruscan is a noun from 1584. Number 1. The language of the Etruscans, which is of uncertain affiliation. So they're saying right there, we don't know everything that we need to know about this.
Like they used affiliation, because they probably mean language group rather than who was this language loyal to? Who were its friends?
Right. How is this language affiliated? We don't know exactly.
Who does it vote for?
Right. Which party does it vote for?
Yeah.
Number 2 is a native or inhabitant of ancient Etruria. I am now very fascinated about this group.
Yeah. Yeah, what went wrong for them? It was a big deal at the time.
Yeah. And, by being in Italy, I would think that there would be some relation in the words and the grammar and everything to Latin and Italian, but, I don't know. They don't give any examples of words or anything, so the dictionary can only do so much.
The Etruscan, I think, was like a big stepping stone to the alphabet that we have today. But it's hard to say, because Italy, because Italy was multiple different countries until really pretty recently. I'm not an expert on the etymologies of like the different regional Italian languages, how distinct they are, and what happened to them. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them were like really quite different to Latin.
Yeah. I have a feeling, from the north to the south, there's going to be a huge range, even today, in, dialects and everything. We actually were in northern Italy last year, and we didn't realize that because we were so close to the border of Germany, that a lot of the signs, like street signs and town signs and everything, had both German and Italian, and a lot of people actually spoke German in that area. So we were like, we probably should have learned some German too.
Yeah, and like you get towards the French bit and the Swiss bit, and it's different again. But even within Italy, I can't remember how many different countries it was, but more than a dozen until Italian unification. So, the regional variation is significant.
I've started to listen to the podcast History of English podcast. In fact, that host, Kevin, was on my show a little while ago. I'm not very far into it yet, but I'm sure he's either already spoken about the Etruscans or he probably will eventually speak about the Etruscans. So, maybe I'll get to learn more about that in 5 years when I get to that part. I'm going to try to make the sound effect myself right now. This is probably going to fail miserably, but I'm just going to go... Ring!
That was really good. You should be really
proud. I tried
proud.
to be as trill as possible.
That was nice. I do feel a bit left out of the sound effect making. But
Don't worry. You will have so many opportunities.
it's true.
Okay, the next word is not really something that we can pronounce very well. It is 2 words, et sec. If I wanted to try to pronounce it, the first word is just et, and the second word is seq, and it's an abbreviation. No year for some reason. The abbreviations don't get a year.
No, not allowed.
And this just means and the following ones. And the following ones. So, obviously, we need a bit more context. It's Latin. Oh, it's short for et sequens, which means also and the following one. And that's pretty much it. So we see the word sequence in there, a sequence of things. Do you know where this gets used?
I don't remember ever seeing it. I've seen etc., of course.
Yeah.
That's probably the most popular of this formula. And I've seen et al. Quite a bit. But not et sec. Maybe we just don't need it as much.
Yeah, I wonder why. Something about just and the following ones. So it's not, so et al. Is like this one plus this other group, right? This book was written, somebody et al. But yeah, why? You'd think that you could use et sec here, this person plus all the following people, but then I guess you'd have to list all of them in that context. I'm not sure.
Is it used in mathematics? I don't know.
Be.
I mean, the thing is, I can see many cases in which it would be useful, but if it's an abbreviation that people don't understand, then it's kind of a waste of time to use it.
Yeah, I have a feeling this sort of just fell out of favor at some point, and we just don't care about et sec anymore.
They can't all be winners.
No, they don't all win. Sound effect time. This is the most this glockenspiel is going to get played in a long time, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's not been the busiest glockenspiel the last few years. My glockenspiel career slowed down.
Well, maybe this will pick it up again.
I don't deserve it.
The next word. Okay, speaking of your question from earlier, our next word is a suffix, E-T-T-E. I would just pronounce that et. And it's a noun suffix, and it means one, little one, as in kitchenette. And then number 2, it means female, as in farmerette. I've never
Shut
seen
up.
farmerette
No one
before.
says farmerette.
Right?
I remember being on a train with some man once. He was a stranger and he just started talking at me, which is not my favorite. And he was a few decades older than me, and he started talking about what his daughters did, and he was like fishing around for a word to describe his daughter's job, and he came up with tailoress. And I was like, you could just say tailor. And he's like, yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I think about farmerette.
Yep. I've seen a few like this, and I'm just like, why? I guess back in the day, they wanted to say you're a male this, a female this, but, do we need them? Are there any et words that should stick around that you like? I don't know.
I think some of them are quite sassy if they're inanimate, like kitchenette. And I suppose bachelorette has a certain force in the Björk song of that title. But with farmerette, it just seems to be predicated upon like making sure you understand that this little lady farmer is a lesser farmer.
Right.
It's not just that she's female and must be distinguished. She must be also the diminutive. And I also see it going the other way these days, where you have like people saying male nanny. That's still a nanny, and it annoys me, the things people are driven to point out. I know that male nannies are more unusual than female nannies, and the same in like medical profession. Like people will say male nurse,
right?
And it's like
just a nurse.
It's a profession for all the genders. Yeah. So as if you listen to my show for any length of time, you'll probably be aware that I wish it would all just go away, all the gendering of the language, and most of it could go away, and yet people still persist.
Yeah. And I have to point out that one live episode you did where you were talking about changing the title on your some sort of card, driver's license or something like that.
No, it's my bank card.
Bank card, yeah.
Yeah.
That was...
Because in the US, when I opened a bank account, they did not ask for a title, which was good.
Yeah.
Like, your banking system is absolutely absurd and incredibly old-fashioned in many ways. Like, I haven't used a check in 15 years, but you persist with those. But not having a title on my bank card was preferable. Well done.
Yes, we don't need those. Back to the et suffix. You started to point this out a little bit, that it's interesting that it's either little one or female, and so just the fact that this suffix can mean both of those things, kitchenette or a lady something, a lady job, already it's designating that the woman who does that job is lesser than the male counterpart, because it means both things, and that's not at all surprised from our history, but yeah, that's just another little dig.
Yeah, well, particularly with farmerette, I would have thought if you must indicate the gender, you would use farmeress for that, unless you were determined to use the diminutive. I'm surprised that the dictionary chose that term. I don't know when this dictionary is from, but maybe farmerette was a word in currency in ways that I simply don't understand in the present.
It's a little old. I want to say it's maybe about 10 years old, but it's not that old.
No, that's young for a dictionary, because they can't update them all that often, because it
Right.
takes so long to rewrite a dictionary.
But
yeah,
yes,
I'm surprised they would choose that. I would have thought if it's an American English dictionary, then bachelorette, if you're choosing a gendered term that ends in et, would be far more common than farmerette.
yeah. There have been some odd examples in this book. That's one of them. And maybe they're just like, we're just trying to give some love to these other words and things that people don't know about as well.
Yeah, that's not what dictionaries are doing.
They're
That's
not
their job.
supposed to. No.
Nope.
I
I wonder also, just a lot of them are not written from scratch every new edition. A lot of them are
Yeah.
just reusing the previous editions. So maybe farmerette was a big thing in the 1930s edition.
Holdover from many decades ago. And the word farmerette, I looked ahead, it is actually in this book as its own entry. So that'll be interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what does that say? Or we're not allowed to know for another year.
Right. Let's see. No, we'll break the rule.
Thanks.
Let's see. Where did it go? Farmerette. It just is a woman who is a farmer or farmhand. Either one.
Okay.
From 1902.
Yeah, I mean, if you called her farmer, then you'd probably understand what she's doing.
Yeah. It's pretty clear. And yeah, we got
Pretty
et.
clear. Stop
We got
wasting our time.
S. Yeah, like you said, is another one. Tricks is another.
Yeah, farmer tricks. That's a bit more sassy.
That one would be much more fun.
Yeah.
Okay, sound effect time. Just let it ring. Okay, the next word is etude or etude, spelled E-T-U-D-E, and it looks like there's an accent on the E. I can't remember the names of these accents, but this is the one that goes down on the left and up on the right, and it makes the sound like whoop.
That's an acute accent.
Acute. Thank you. I did read that there was some word in maybe the D's that gave names to all them, and of course I forgot them all.
Yeah. The mnemonic that I learnt from a boy at school in French class was, because there's the acute accent going that way and the grave accent going the other way. And it was, acute little bunny ran up a hill and down again to his grave.
Okay, that's good to know. I don't think I will ever forget that now.
No, I clearly haven't.
That bunny sure took a journey.
Yeah,
that day.
a sad, fateful journey.
Yeah, but we don't pronounce it grave except
No.
in the mnemonic. It's grave.
Grave indeed.
Grave. Okay.
Well, I think because I this was in the context of French, so I don't know what it's accent aigu and grave, but I don't know what the equivalent would be in English.
Yeah. Well, I will remember this one. A cute little bunny ran up the hill and then went down to its grave.
Down again to its grave, and then circumflex. You're just gonna have to remember in your own time.
Circumflex. Wait,
That's the hat-looking one.
the hat one. Yep. I always call it the carrot or the hat. That's
Yeah.
a circumflex. Okay.
Yeah, but there's no mnemonic for that from this boy at school.
I
Too
think
late to ask
we
him
can
for
come
one.
up with one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So etude is a noun from circa 1837. Number 1, a piece of music for the practice of a point of technique.
Oh.
So like if you're trying to learn scales on the piano, I guess, if you're trying to learn a specific technique, that would be an etude. I never realized that that was about trying to learn a specific technique.
Nor did I. And yeah, a lot of very proficient composers. That's what they're up to. Interesting.
Yeah. Number 2 is a composition built on a technical motive, but played for its artistic value. So again, it's all about the technique, the technical thing that you're learning from that, but it's also those things can also be very artistic and nice sounding or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, that's interesting to learn. Learned something. I also haven't seen motive in this context. I think now we'd probably put motif with an F rather than VE.
Yeah, I wonder what the reason was for that. This reminded me of... I played the saxophone for about 10 years in like junior high and high school and a little in college. And I think I was in high school and maybe it was my birthday or something. And they were like, Spencer, play us something. Like, fine. I think there's actually video of this. It's the only reason I remember because I've seen the video. And I played something and then somebody said, what's that called? And I was like, practice number 3 or something. It didn't have any fun name, but it sounded nice. So it was something for the technical motive, but also had some artistic value.
Yeah, you did an etude without even knowing.
I did. This is a French word, and it literally means study. Let's see, anything else? And there's more at the word study. Yeah.
Yeah, and you still hear that in French, like étudier, meaning to study.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you with all your years and years of French, you know this.
Yeah, étudieing the French, yeah.
Okay, unless you have anything else about etude, sound effect time.
No.
The next word is étui. Yeah, étui. You can emphasize either syllable. It is spelled E-T-U-I. It is a noun from 1611, and this is a small ornamental case. It's a French word, but it doesn't say what it means.
I have only seen this word used in the context of like a small case for needles and things like that, like sewing equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder whether etymologically it has anything to do with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm guessing because it doesn't actually say what the French word means, I'm guessing it literally probably just does mean a case or a small case or something.
Yeah. I mean, some etymology is just like, oh, yeah, it meant that thing. Meant the same.
And that's it.
And you're like, oh, well, the path was short and the adventure limited.
Just like this word and the definition. It's very short.
So it's from a verb estuier, which meant to put in or put aside or keep or imprison.
Oh.
So it's a little case for imprisoning your trinkets and small necessities.
Yeah. Imprisoning those needles in a little jail.
That'll teach them to stab people in the finger.
They got too stabby. I had to put them away. Okay, sound effect. The next word is et ux. It's another abbreviation in the same world as et sec and et al and et cetera. 2 words, et and then ux. It just means, have you ever heard of this one? It means and wife.
And wife. Was this when they were just like man by his name and then the appendage who is a human, but let's not really talk about them as if they are.
Right. Doesn't get to have their name on anything. It's like, when you get the invitations, Mr. and Mrs. Spencer Parks, she's got a name too.
What if there's the husband equivalent? I can't remember what the Latin for husband is. Vir.
Or is there
et
one?
Vir?
Et vir. So this is from et uxor, U-X-O-R. So is that the Latin word for wife? Do you know?
That's right, yeah. And you get uxorious in modern English for like wife guy, essentially.
I've never heard of this word. Well, that's not rare for me. Most of these words I've never heard of.
Yeah, you'll get to uxorious in
eventually.
About 2040.
Yeah, something like that. So
little treat.
You said that the Latin word for husband is vir, the V-I-R?
There's that and there's maritus. And conjunx is like spouse. And
Okay.
that's sort of like con and union. It's like union with someone.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if there was a husband equivalent, it probably would be in this episode, and I'm not seeing it. So, but I'm also not surprised at all because of society.
It's got its priorities.
Yeah. Sound effect. Glockenspiel. I also just love that word glockenspiel.
Yeah, satisfying.
The next is ETV, all caps, abbreviation for educational television.
Was that a generic term, or was there a company that paid its way into the dictionary?
ETV? That's a good question.
Yeah. The MTV of education.
Right. I would love it if there was a whole channel called ETV, and it was, for those young, hip 90s kids, 80s and 90s kids. But no, I'm not aware of any ETV company or station.
No. 90s kids not allowed to rot their brains with short form education.
That now just shows reality TV.
Yeah. It's cheaper to make.
Yeah. Glockenspiel.
Then went a different way this time.
She changed it up. Okay, here we are getting into the fun section because none of this has been fun, but now it's fun.
Aww.
The next word is No.
You can do
the
it.
brain,
I
the
believe
mouth
in you.
didn't work. Etymologize.
There you have it.
This is with an S at the end because it is the British variation of etymologize with a Z or a Z,
Thanks
which
for
is coming up
translating.
real quick.
Yeah,
but first,
hold on.
hold on. We have to hear some very trill sound effects first. We have etymologist. Would you call yourself an etymologist? I mean,
No, because that is actually a very technical job, and I did once apply for it at the Oxford English Dictionary in 2003, and I got through to the second round, but no further, and I think they made the right decision. Because you have to have quite a methodical, admin, tolerant brain, and I do not.
we are very glad that you did not get hired because now we get new things from you that are much better.
It would have been a different life, a very
Yeah.
different life, but I appreciate the job as something that I would find hard. You have to just go through as many written sources as you can find, and that can sometimes take years.
Yeah, and it seems similar to a lexicographer. Is that the right word?
There's certainly overlap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but definitely different. So this is a noun from 1635, and it is a specialist in etymology.
If I had $1 for everyone who had ever sent me the joke, people who confuse etymology with entomology bug me in more words than I can say, then I would be retired and long gone.
Yeah. Beforehand, I was even thinking, not that joke, but just mentioning the fact that these words are so closely, they sound so close, they're spelled so similar. But I was like, no, I don't think she needs to hear that anymore because that's plenty. She's heard
It's
it
been
enough.
pointed out. Yeah.
Yeah, just a few times. Let's see. Specialist in etymology. So, I mean, I would say that you are a specialist, but it's not your job. It's not a specific job that you have.
Right.
And so we can't technically call you an etymologist, but
I
because
wouldn't. I'd play it safe. Yeah.
you do the research. Where do you go for your research when you are looking things up? Where do you go for that?
Well, my first stops for etymology are Etym Online
Yep.
and also Wikipedia, because if there's any discrepancies between those two, then that is important first up. Then the Wikipedia, you also often get like sources, like secondary sources that you can go to. And in Etym Online, you can also see related words, which can be very informative. It's a very good website if you like serendipitous language finding. And then after that, it's just a matter of Googling, and you find some things that are often repeated, and that gives them the sense of reliability, but you just develop an instinct for whether something is probably bullshit. And there's some people who I have far more faith in than others. Like, I think Haggard Hawks is always worth checking if he's covered a word.
And I'm not familiar with this person, so who are they and what do they do, and where can we find their stuff?
Well, he used to. Most people are not really enjoying Twitter anymore, if they ever did. He used to tweet words of the day that were really good. But his website is, I believe it's Haggard Hawk. Wait, I'm gonna.
We'll double check.
Yeah, haggardhawks.com. Hawks as in the bird. And he's written a bunch of books. He's a guy called Paul Anthony Jones, who's awfully nice. He's based in the north of England. And it's just very good at word origins.
Would you call him an etymologist then?
Yes, sure. Yeah. I would.
I have gone to Etym Online a fair number of times throughout this podcast journey just to find out a little bit more information. I feel like it's a good starting point. I've never done additional research like you have, but just recently there was some word that I came across and I was looking it up to put something in the show notes, and it gives you something, but there's still a disconnect sometimes. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what maybe the literal Latin or French phrase means and then what it becomes. I think it was maybe something with voice. It was like and I don't remember, something with similar voices, and it was like there's just some stage in there that's missing that I don't know about, and it's bugging me. But I just didn't do the extra research to find out.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to follow your bugged feelings
into
the unknown.
Bringing the entomology back into this. Thank you for that.
I didn't mean to.
Okay, sound effect time. Next is etymologize with a Z. Verb from circa 1530, starting with transitive.
Yeah.
To discover, formulate, or state an etymology for. So every time that you or I are talking about the etymology, we are etymologizing it or if you're reaching it, you're discovering
I guess
it.
you're establishing it, yeah.
Yeah, learning about it in some way, talking about it. Well, you wouldn't be creating it because it's already been created, but unearthing
I
it.
wouldn't. But it does say discover, formulate, or state. And state is easier than discover, I reckon.
Yeah, somebody else can write it out for me, and I can state it easily.
Yeah. Teamwork.
The intransitive is to study or formulate etymologies. So yeah, studying, definitely. Formulating, I don't know, it sort of feels like a weird word to me, but I guess it makes sense because if you're taking sources from all these different places and you're sort of putting it together, that would be formulating, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is the most useful verb.
I'm
not angry at it, but I don't need it much.
No, we're not saying I'm going to etymologize this word for you, so listen to me now.
No, I wouldn't dare.
It sounds like it's the creation. If you just think about the word itself, it sounds like the creation of an etymology, but obviously that's not a thing because, you just listen to one episode of Helen's podcast and you're going to learn that these words have this massive history culturally as well as just linguistically.
I mean, sometimes, and then sometimes just this dead end.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the biggie word of this episode. Sound effect, please. It's giving me Mr. Rogers vibes a little bit. Dude, I think when he would go into the fantasy world, that sound effect would play.
Well, that explains why I've gone into a fantasy world.
Called the dictionary. The next word is etymology. Noun from the 14th century. Let's have a little party now. Okay. I didn't realize this. There's two definitions, but one of them is like 7 lines long. Okay.
Greedy.
Yeah. All right. Let's just get into this. I'm going to try and read this all together and not mess it up at all.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
Godspeed.
Let's do it. This is the history of a linguistic form, like a word, shown by tracing its development since its earliest recorded occurrence in the language where it is found, by tracing its transmission from one language to another, by analyzing it into its component parts, by identifying its cognates in other languages, or by tracing it and its cognates to a common ancestral form in an ancestral language. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Do you think they covered all
Can't
the
argue
bases?
with it. Just seems like a lot of words
It's a
to
lot.
explain, but maybe it can't be done in less.
Yeah. How could you simplify that? I mean, there's a lot of parts to that.
Yeah, a lot of people would just say the origins of word.
Yeah. The history of a word, of a linguistic form. That's another interesting part, is that they give the example of a word, but it's really about a linguistic form. So how would you describe that? Like a phrase maybe would be another example, opposed to just a word?
Of how they've described it. Or I don't know. I mean, I think what they're describing here is far more related to lexicography, perhaps. But then it's a dictionary, so maybe that's the approach they're going to take as lexicographers.
Right. Show me.
But I think usually the definitions of etymology that I've seen have been a lot more pared back to the origins of a word.
Yeah, a lot of pieces to this. Tracing its development, so finding, the earliest recorded time that it was used,
Yeah.
the transmission from one language to another, and that's a big part of that. Obviously, we see
Yeah.
Greek and Latin a lot.
Sure.
Analyzing it into its component parts, so breaking it down to, this word was combined from these other words.
Yeah.
Identifying its cognates in other languages, similar words in other languages.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I found so interesting in my Latin class was, oh my God, there's all these words, and of course, defenestration is the best example ever. This is where we get these words from. I'm a lefty, so sinistra means like wicked and evil, and then it's also the word for Latin, the Latin word for left, and that was a big cultural thing. So
Yeah. It's a whole deal.
It's a fascinating topic, and I love learning about it. I've never been a big word person as much as you have. English, reading, writing were always my weakest subjects, but for some reason, I've just been sort of fascinated by it. So that's kind of why I'm doing this whole thing.
I think often the way that school makes you practice a particular discipline or relate to it are ones that do not inspire affection or interest. And if you can find that in adult life, then that's great. But it's not your fault if at school you couldn't.
Yeah, partly the way that the educational system is, and also partly just the way that your brain is routed, because I was always more math and science. But yeah,
Right.
It's good to be learning this stuff now.
Yeah. And it's nice that it's something that you can learn any time in your life.
Yeah.
I think it's probably much harder to get into certain school subjects at this point if you're not in a formal educational context. But language, you've got to use it all the time. You can use that as a springboard to more involvement in it if you want. But you're kind of stuck with it anyway. Like nearly everyone alive has to participate in language in some way.
In some form, yeah. I just wish I could remember more of what I read here, because most of it...
No, you can't. Your brain needs to free up the space. Yeah. You can't keep it.
I'm losing all my childhood memories, maybe.
You'll forget how to breathe, and that's a disaster. So it's easier to outsource the dictionary knowledge to a book that's already got
Right. Record it, listen to it when I need to.
Exactly.
Number 2 for etymology is a branch of linguistics concerned with etymologies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unsurprising. Yep.
Etymological is an adjective, and
Sure is.
etymologically is an adverb. How would you use that word in a sentence? I did that thing etymologically.
Sometimes I do actually use it when I'm talking about how a word might not have an obvious connection with something now, but etymologically it does. But that is a lot of syllables. 7 syllables is a lot to get out of your mouth successfully.
Yeah. I have an affinity for these long words. I don't know why. They're just so fun. Like, oh, it's unnecessarily long, but it's great.
Unnecessarily is also very long.
Yes. The etymology of etymology doesn't really give us much information from the Greek word etymon plus the suffix logia, which means logi. So, etymon from Greek, what does that mean?
It means origin, and the logia or logos is word.
Yeah. So it's literally just the origin of words.
Yeah, it's odd that they've sort of expended a lot of space in this dictionary entry on a definition that I think is inefficient because it kind of repeats something about 3 times, and yet they don't tell you what the origin words mean, so it's a bit redundant to include them.
Yeah, it is.
Badly done.
Well, okay, so I think the reason that they didn't give more information in the etymology is because it's coming up in the next word. Sometimes they do that, which is a little bit weird. It's like, well, why did you put it in that word? Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. I wanted to ask you, I have seen the word quick come up a lot. So sometimes in the etymology it says there's more at this word, and a lot of times it says there's more at the word quick, even though quick doesn't seem like it's related at all to the word that I was just talking about. Do you have any knowledge of why that word? What's with the etymology of the word quick?
Oh, what is the etymology of the word quick? I know that quick often means alive in older literature. Quick, yeah. Alive, sprightly, speedy.
I'll have to keep that in mind then.
I don't know why everything would be referring to it.
Yeah, and obviously, like, it's not all them, but there's been enough that it seems a little bit odd that word specifically would come up more often.
Yeah, it also means, like, living people, and I remember seeing it referring to pregnancy when the impending child is big enough to be moving around in a noticeable way. And then there's the bit of your finger, the quick, where it's very painful if you get something stuck in it. But no, I don't know why you've got these cross references. I'd be interested to learn which words go back to quick.
Yeah, if I find one, or I'll let you know. But yeah, it just came up not too long ago, so I was curious about that one. With your podcast,
yes,
is there any sort of other like interesting behind the scenes information that you can give? Like how do you come up with the topics? I'm sure there's a whole range of reasons why that happens, but any sort of interesting stories from that?
I'm sure I used to have interesting stories, and now my brain's gone blank.
Yeah.
There's a few different sources. Sometimes someone will write to me saying, I study this thing, or I lived through this thing, and I think, oh, that sounds interesting. Or I'll just be insomniac and just questions will occur in my head, or I have a lot of open browser tabs, and in there's just a lot of articles and things where I'm like, oh, this is curious. And if I'm curious about it, maybe the listeners will also be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like maybe more recently you've been getting into other cultures and languages, maybe a bit more than you had started off with. I could be wrong about that, but there's definitely a lot that I've seen recently about other languages and other cultures, and I'm really grateful because I'm learning a lot from those. And this is a podcast about language in general, not just English. And so, keeping Native American languages alive or something like that, that's been really great. I thought I had.
I'm a bit limited by myself, my own imagination, my own English speaking, the podcast format. The other day I interviewed someone who is hard of hearing, which occasionally happens. Actually, no, it used to happen a lot. I used to make a podcast with someone who was hard of hearing, and she was in nearly every episode of my podcast, Veronica Mars Investigations. But it's technologically, it's a slightly different process because as a medium, podcasting is not generally very accessible. A lot of it depends on the individual podcaster making it accessible.
Yeah.
But there's some limits, many of which are my fault. And sometimes I just can't find someone to talk about a thing. There's a couple of topics that I've been waiting to cover for years, and I just cannot get the people to talk about them.
Well, I can't wait to see where that all goes. I've
Me too.
yeah. One other sort of behind the scenes question. Every episode starts with sort of a unique line. I do this to language. Where do you come up with those? Those are so just witty and short and clever. It's just sort of...
Oh, no. That's just pure desperation now.
Yeah.
Now that I've done nearly 200 of them, it's just whatever you can fish out of the sewers. But I usually advocate for the start of a podcast making a strong statement about what it is within the first few seconds. Because even before the pod boom, when there's so many other podcasts people could listen to, you were still competing with the entirety of the internet and then all the offline entertainment. So when we started our podcast Answer Me This in 2007, we had a theme tune, and every time the theme tune was like a couplet of questions. My co-host Ollie would sing one line, I would sing the other line, and thinking up those sometimes. We did 400 episodes. That was a real rod for our own backs. But it changed every time. It established the show within 17 seconds as being about questions, being humorous. There were two of us. These are our names. And so doing that with the start of The Allusionist, that's my way of trying to do that. But it's basically just some absolute nonsense.
Yeah. You know what? We need it. And yeah, it definitely starts off in a good way. Allie Ward does something similar. I've thought about doing something for mine, but there's, these days it's 5 episodes a week, so not possible.
Yes, too much work. With mine, I try to give the impression that language and I have this like slightly contentious, rocky relationship.
Right. There was one recently that was really, really good. But yeah, I can feel the contentious relationship through my ears. All right. Yeah. Well, because we hinted at the etymology of etymology, let's talk about this next word. Sound effect time.
Sorry, that was a bit funky.
It's fantastic. The fact that you have a glockenspiel handy is fantastic.
I mean, who doesn't?
Me.
Embarrassing for you.
It is. This word is etymon. Etymon. Noun from circa 1576. 1A. An earlier form of a word in the same language or an ancestral language.
Oh, I never knew.
Yeah, an earlier form of that. So I can't think of any off the top of my head. Can you think of an example of something like that?
Didn't do my homework.
No.
But yes, there are loads.
Yeah, there are examples. People go out and find them.
Absolutely loads. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands for English alone.
I think it's interesting that they decided to specify in the same language or an ancestral language. I mean, I guess that does designate it differently than a different language, but I don't know. Seems a little...
Well, I think if it was a different language unrelated, then that would be a cognate. And ancestral language, there's a more direct lineage.
Exactly.
And maybe with English, you particularly have to point this out because English has a much less kind of consistent history than a lot of other languages.
Yeah. The ancestral languages of English are vast.
There's so many. Yeah, it's more than most languages would have.
1B, a word in a foreign language that is the source of a particular loan word. So,
sure, yeah.
So like sinestra, I guess when we're talking about the word left and evil, that would be an etymon, I guess, because it's the source.
That would be an etymon in the 1A definition. The 1B definition is a loan word, so that's basically a word that you've taken from the foreign language and incorporated it into your language.
Right. That was my mistake there. Foreign language that is the source of a particular loan word. Yeah, okay. I guess that's when the word is the same or similar, but there's a lot of words that have evolved from, say, Latin, that would be 1A. And then if you're like, oh, we're just going to take this French word, like étui, that would be it.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Like étui.
Number 2, a word or morpheme from which words are formed by composition or derivation.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go.
Okay.
Those are some etymons.
We love our etymons. This
Well, we tolerate them.
this is from. Well, we already talked about this a little bit. It's a Latin or Greek word, which literally it means literal meaning of a word according to its origin, and that is from etymos, which means true, akin to the Greek word etios, which also means true. And there's more at the word sooth, S-O-O-T-H.
Forsooth. So I was a bit wrong earlier when I said it meant origin.
Well, it's related to that literal meaning of a word according to its origin. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit stretched out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
It's fascinating.
Do you want
I kind of wish I learned Greek because I feel like that would be helpful here, but
Well, you get a lot of the Greek coming to English via Latin.
Yeah.
Latin will acquire the Greek words and then English will get them.
yeah.
So, you get your supply.
I get it somewhere. I just don't know how to pronounce it, and that's frustrating, but I have to accept it.
That I think is quite learnable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just-
It's the Greek alphabet is like fairly small, and you can do it. You did some maths.
I did some maths. I know a few of those letters. Epsilon, that came up recently.
Yeah.
Okay, we finished the ET section. It's a momentous occasion, and we are now getting into the EU section, and I need to hear some trilly sounds.
I punched my mic then just for effect, but actually by accident.
This is EU with a capital E. It is the symbol for europium.
Well, there was bound to be a chemical here somewhere.
Yeah, just about every episode.
What is this one? Not familiar with it.
Europium.
Atomic number 63, silvery white metal. Okay. Europium. One of the rarest of the rare earth elements on Earth.
Interesting.
Well,
And I assume must have been either found or created somewhere in Europe. Somewhere in that vast region of Europe.
sometimes it's really quite infuriating how unimaginative some naming is.
Yeah, why'd they pick europium? Okay.
Its own Wikipedia page is quite coy on that, so maybe it's really embarrassing.
The Wikipedia page for europium?
Yeah, it does not. Okay. Yeah, named by its discoverer, French chemist Eugène Demarçay in 1896 from Europe. But I don't know what his motivation was for that.
I guess he didn't want to specify. He just loves all of the European countries. He wants them all to come. He'd be so happy with the European Union.
Don't make me choose.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, sound effect time.
Because it's going to get sad for me in a sec. So
Here we go with EU, all caps. It's an abbreviation for European Union. What do you have to say about European Union? Anything?
I mean, I just feel incredibly sad about it because Britain leaving the European Union was like an extreme impact on my life and on the country where I'm from. And I don't think that it will be fixed in my lifetime. And overnight, my nationality shrank from 28 countries that I could have lived and worked in to 1. So I'm pretty sore about it, honestly, still. And there's not been anything good about it.
Yeah. From what I remember seeing, just the little bit that I followed it, which was not enough and not as much as obviously
No,
you,
it's
but that a lot of people just weren't educated about what it would mean if they did this. And so there was this big push from a certain group of people. And that's just sort of what a lot of the public listened to, not really realizing what it meant.
Yes, I think we've noted that phenomenon plenty, that populist movements are hijacked by basically fascists without regard for consequences because it's not them that have to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this short but very fervent quite racist campaign, this quite nationalistic campaign that was kind of unusual for Britain. Like, I don't remember patriotism being popular in my formative years. But the reality of it is this incredibly complex situation to do with farming treaties and stuff like that, which is less likely to whip up people's emotions and rage and get them to vote. Mm-hmm. So there you have it.
Yeah, well, in terms of the European Union in general, obviously you know a lot more about that than all of us Americans put together. Like when did that start? What was, as much as you know, how did that get created?
That's like a huge area of history. Before my time, was not educated about it. Let's not.
Yeah, I am grateful that when I have gone to Europe a few times, that it's easy to go from country to country. My wife and I will probably do that later this year.
Nice.
So I'm happy about that, but also not happy that your country has left the European Union. So
it was a needless act of willful self-destruction, but that's our faults. And yeah, I'm not saying that the European Union is a perfect organization, because no organization is. But
yeah,
there's certain things
nice
about
to
it that
stay.
are positive intents.
Yeah. On that note, let's make another sound effect. Here is EU again. This is a prefix. Number 1A, it means either well or easily, as in, not familiar with this word, euclase?
Me neither.
Euclase.
Is a beryllium aluminium hydroxide silicate metal. Again, they've chosen the big hits. Farmeret,
Yeah.
euclase.
Let's see what else we find. By the word euclase will be in the next episode. So well or easily. It does say compared to dys, D-Y-S. So I'm guessing that would be the opposite.
Yeah, like dysphoria, dysfunctional, but they could have had euphoria. There's not really eufunctional, but there's like eulogy. There's lots of EU terms rather than euclase.
So, eulogy, that's going to be a fun word to talk about. So well or easily, I'm trying to think of... I'm looking at the etymology for that word, but it's not matching. Anyway, I'll get to that one.
Yeah, that's a problem for another day.
Yeah, exactly. Future Spencer. 1B for the U prefix. This means good. As in the example, eudaimonism or demonism. Eudemonism. That is also going to be in the next episode, and that sounds fascinating.
Does sound fun, doesn't it? What a good time you're going to have with it next time.
So, well, based on just what I'm seeing here, if it means good and the word demon is in there, does that mean that it's about a good demon, a good evil spirit? I don't know.
There's different kinds of demon, and this demon spelt this way, where it's like daimon, is like a spirit rather than specifically demon. But you also do have like Lucifer being a fallen angel. There's more crossover than maybe certain religious structures would like to emphasize.
Mm-hmm. And again,
I mean, it's all made up anyway.
That's true. These are not facts that we are talking about necessarily. It also says compared to dys. So, that's a lot easier. Dys, the opposite of that, opposite of good is, bad or evil. So that's dys. Yeah.
Yeah, you must have been through dys a year ago.
Yeah. 6 months, 8 months, something like that. Yeah. The number 2 for the U prefix just means true, as in euchromatin. So yeah, that'll also be in the next episode.
Again, choosing the big hit words, aren't they?
Yeah. Can you think of a different one that might have been a bit of a better example? I mean, I don't know a lot of U words, but there's a number coming up here. I'm looking ahead.
Now I'm thinking about euphemism, but obviously euphemisms are a bit not true.
Looking at that, yeah. I don't see anything about good, but yeah, lots of EU words.
Yeah. I mean, euphemism is good rather than true. But yeah, there's a lot.
So the etymology of this one says it is from the Greek eu, which means well, from the neutral eis, E-Y-S, which means good, perhaps akin to the Latin word esse, which means to be.
It's true. That's probably neuter rather than neutral, even though they are related,
Oh.
but in a grammatical context.
The neuter. Okay, yeah. So good, being well, all that stuff. That's where this word is from.
Yeah. Enjoy it.
So now, obviously, we all have to think about that prefix when we go through the next handful of episodes all the time. But before that,
Pages and pages.
yeah, sound effect. We have Eubacterium. Eubacterium, noun from 1913. This is any of the bacteria excluding those included in the archaebacteria or archaebacteria or the archaea. Archaea. Not
You're
sure
getting a
what
lot of
those
the big
are.
words today.
Yeah. So it's any of the bacteria that's not those specific bacterias, and it doesn't have etymology, so I don't know what sort of version of the U prefix we're using here. Are they good bacteria? Are they well? Are they easily?
Very well.
Yeah.
Very well. They
How
lack
are you
cell
today,
nuclei.
bacteria?
I think they now, this term is a bit obsolete now.
Eubacterium?
Now they're called archaea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as hinted at by this.
Excluding those included. So what the definition is saying is that they're different from the archaea.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
but-
I was looking up archaebacteria, and archaebacteria is sort of.
Oh,
like
those
being
are similar.
dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So eubacteria. Let's have a look at them. I don't know anything about bacteria, so maybe obvious to people already. Wetland
To those people
info.
who are studying
Okay.
bacteria.
Well, how confusing, because eubacteria seem to be hitched to the archaebacteria, even though those are excluded. Oh, it's complicated.
Very complicated.
I retire from this term because I'm not qualified.
Yeah, me too. Eubacterial with an L is an adjective.
Good to know.
Always. Sound effect. That's a good one. You got one more after this. One more, so make it count.
Pressure.
The next word is eucalypt. Eucalypt. Noun from 1877. The synonym is just eucalyptus, which will be in the next episode. So I'm sorry, we don't get to talk about koala's food today.
Ah. So I wonder when you use eucalypt and when you use eucalyptus, is eucalypt like a kind of category?
Right. Well, I was thinking that maybe eucalypt is the older version, but when I look at the years, eucalypt is actually 76 years after eucalyptus, so that doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't add up.
Yeah. No. All right. One more word. Sound effect, please.
Okay.
It's beautiful. Beautiful sound. Are you a fan of They Might Be Giants at all?
A little bit, yeah. I don't know tons of their work. My husband is one of his favorite bands though of all time.
Yeah. One of their early songs features a glockenspiel. So when they would do it live at a show, they would bring out the glockenspiel, and it was used for one note, just like 2 or 3 times through the whole song. They would just hit one note, and that was it. I love that they made such a big deal out of this glockenspiel. Okay, this last word. We're getting back to chemistry here. It is the word eucalyptol or eucalyptol, spelled Eucalyptol. This is a noun from 1879. I'm going to assume that this is related to eucalyptus, but we'll see.
Sure seems a strong possibility.
Yeah. I think it's a good guess. This is a liquid, C10H18O, with an odor of camphor that occurs in many essential oils, like eucalyptus, and is used especially as an expectorant and flavoring agent. And it is called also cineole, Cineole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
odor
think
of
this is
camphor.
the extraction that makes certain products kind of tingly and give you that fresh feeling. So they use it in mouthwash. They also put it in cigarettes.
Really? It reminds me. So this seems like it's derived from the plant eucalyptus, or
Yes.
sort of like that. A little bit different, but it reminds me a little bit of. I want to say, is it carmine? I could have the word wrong, but it's from a gland near the anus of the beaver.
Oh, I
think
thought
it's called
carmine was like a red dye.
That might be the other word I'm thinking. There's a different word. I think it also starts with a C, but it's like it adds a vanilla flavor to things. This one is a lot more tame than that one.
Beaver gland vanilla. Excuse me while I just ruin my search history for you.
Oh yeah, my search
Castorium.
history is- That's it. It's from the castor gland. Yeah.
I'm just obsessed with how they learnt that these things had
Yeah.
some utility to humans, particularly edible.
Why do people know that tastes and smells like vanilla?
I think
That's
you
what I
know
wanna
why. I think a lot of people were rimming beavers in the past.
Yeah, they were.
Sorry.
That statement could go so many ways.
Yeah.
So eucalyptol, odor of camphor. I'm trying to think of what is that?
I don't think
I'm
you get
thinking
camphor
floral.
around as much these days, but like if you have like moth proofing stuff, if you have like the little balls that are camphor balls,
Yeah. So maybe like a bit of a strong smell like that.
like a little medicinal smell. But I think also eucalyptus, that'll smell of like, cold lozenges and the stuff that you smear on your chest to like try and
Yeah.
move some gunk out.
I can't think if I've ever smelled anything like that, but now I'm going to keep an eye out for something that has like eucalyptus scents or something added.
Don't put it in your eye, it'll hurt.
No, don't want to do that. Okay, we have now reached the end of the words. So what I'm going to do is quickly reread them, and then you get to pick a word of the episode. And I have stopped guessing what people will guess, what they'll pick, because I have been wrong. Today we had Etrurian, Etruscan, et sec, et, etude, etui, et ux, etv, etymologize, etymologist, etymologize, etymology, etymon, eu, eubacterium, eucalypt, and eucalyptol.
Yeah.
Anything jump out at you?
Well, I think et sec deserves a little more than what it has got. I think it's a somewhat useful term. And
Somewhat.
I can imagine using it if I had a sequence to attend to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how we could do this thing and everything else that follows it at sec.
Yeah.
So here's the other minor curveball that I would like to throw at you, and you can, of course, say no. Thank you, no. Would you like to sing a very short little song off the top of your head about et sec?
No, not right now. But that's only because it's getting dark and I want to go outside before the daylight goes.
That's fair.
Sorry.
I will just sing et sec means and the following ones. Wonderful music added to that. Thank you.
Well, it's a strong adjective.
So we strong adjective. We are finishing up here. What would you like to plug? What would you like to tell the people where they can find you? What should they do if they want to learn more about Helen Zaltzman?
Oh, I mean, I don't want to boss them about, but if you could listen to The Allusionist, which is available via theallusionist.org and the myriad pod places. That's a strong start, I think.
Yeah. And I believe there's links to other things on that same webpage, if I
Naturally.
remember correctly. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a blast. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this ridiculous thing, ridiculous reading the dictionary. And until next time, this is Spencer dispensing information. Goodbye.